Right now, as you're listening to this, there is a voice in your head that is actively trying to make you weaker.
Oh, absolutely. It is always there.
Right, like it's that voice that tells you you're tired or, that you've done enough today and you just deserve a break.
The negotiator.
Yeah, negotiator. And I mean, for your entire life, you've probably believed that voice is just a biological safety mechanism. Like you run hard, lactic acid builds up, your glycogen depletes, and that voice is just your body's check engine light.
Which makes perfect sense intuitively, right? But the reality is quite different.
Exactly. Because today, in this deep dive, we're looking at the evidence that proves it's actually a psychological trap. We're pulling all of this from the mindset principles in Can't Hurt Me, and it really just shatters how we view our own limits.
It does. It's fundamentally a misunderstanding of our own neurology. We assume our perceived limits are these hard physical boundaries, like a brick wall.
Right, like we physically cannot go any further.
Exactly. But when you look at the mechanics of human endurance, or even just mental resilience, that wall is mostly a projection.
Mhm.
It's this mechanism designed by your brain to prioritize short-term comfort over long-term capability.
And that is the core tension we're going to pull apart today. But to be clear, we aren't looking at this through the lens of, like, superheroes or genetic freaks who are just born without fear.
No, not at all. This applies to everyone.
Right. We are breaking down the granular, microscopic, and honestly, often really painful daily decisions that literally rewire the brain. Because the premise here is that almost everyone, you, me, everybody listening, we are all operating drastically below our actual ceiling.
And it's not due to a lack of talent
Yeah.
or a lack of intelligence. It really comes down to a structural flaw in how we handle friction.
Okay, unpack that a little. What do you mean by structural flaw?
Well, most people step back the exact moment their internal threat detection system flashes red. And, in the modern world, red rarely means actual physical danger.
Right, a saber-toothed tiger isn't chasing you.
Exactly. Today, red means awkwardness. It means a difficult conversation you don't want to have, or just the physical discomfort of a really hard workout.
So the brain interprets all of that friction as a literal threat to homeostasis.
Yes, and it immediately starts generating rationalizations to get you to retreat to safety.
Man, that is so true. So, think about your own baseline for a second as you're listening to this. Think about the last time you abandoned a project or
Yeah.
you compromised on a standard or, I don't know, you just walked out of the gym 20 minutes early.
Did you genuinely reach biological failure?
Right. Did your muscles actually give out or did you just hit a localized pocket of psychological discomfort and accept it as a limit?
Usually it's the latter.
Yeah, and that's what we have to untangle first.
Well-
The architecture of our own excuses, the enemy within. Because we love to externalize our friction, right?
Oh, we are masters at it.
We really are. We blame the economy, we blame our boss, we blame the social media algorithm, our childhood, but the real battle is just entirely internal.
And evolutionary biology plays a huge role in this, which I think is fascinating. We are operating with hardware that was optimized for scarcity.
So like caveman days.
Right. For hundreds of thousands of years, preserving calories and avoiding unnecessary risk was literally the only way to survive.
Makes sense.
If a hunter-gatherer burned an extra 2,000 calories sprinting when they didn't absolutely have to, they might starve to death. So the brain developed this intense underlying mandate seek comfort, conserve energy, avoid friction.
So the brain is basically this extreme hoarder, but instead of like old newspapers and junk, it's hoarding metabolic energy.
That's a really good way to look at it. The basal ganglia and the brainstem, which are the older parts of our neurological architecture, they are constantly lacking the prefrontal cortex to just take it easy.
Like an overprotective parent.
Exactly. They want you to sleep in. They want you to avoid the complex, energy-draining task of learning a new skill. And the tricky part is, this biological drive for comfort, it doesn't present itself as laziness.
Wait, really? How does it present itself then?
It presents itself as logic.
Oh man, the voice of logic. That is dangerous.
Highly dangerous.
Because, I mean, hitting the snooze button at 5 a.m., that doesn't feel like a character flaw in the moment, right?
Yep.
It feels like a highly rational, scientifically sound decision.
Right. You tell yourself, I will be so much more productive if I just get another 45 minutes of sleep.
Yes. It's incredibly persuasive.
Because the brain is a master of cognitive dissonance reduction. When your ambition, let's say your desire to start a business, clashes with your biological desire to avoid the friction of failing at that business, It creates psychological pain.
Dissonance.
Right. And to resolve that pain, the brain generates an excuse. It says, well, the market is too saturated right now anyway.
Ah, so the excuse neutralizes the dissonance. It allows you to quit while fully preserving your ego.
Exactly. Which leads directly to self-deception.
We lie to the person in the mirror. We tell our friends, oh, I didn't get the promotion because of office politics, because actually admitting, hey, I was just outworked is psychologically devastating.
It is. But if we are constantly generating these ego-preserving excuses, we are essentially building a prison of comfort.
Right, because every time we take that shortcut, we aren't just saving energy in the moment, are we? We are actively training the brain.
You are strengthening a neural pathway. Every single time you face a stressor and you choose the path of least resistance, you myelinate that specific circuit.
Okay, wait, myelinate. What is myelin?
So myelin is this fatty sheath that insulates nerve fibers in the brain, and it makes signals travel faster. When you practice quitting, you literally make your brain more efficient at quitting.
Wow. So quitting becomes a physical reflex.
Yes, it becomes your default neurological response to pressure. Taking the easy way out structurally weakens your resilience over time.
Okay, but let's apply some real-world friction to this, because I can hear people pushing back on this already.
Sure.
Let's look at someone who is, working a 60-hour week. They've got a screaming toddler at home. Their cortisol levels are just completely through the roof, and they are objectively exhausted.
A very real scenario.
Right, so telling that person, hey, hitting snooze is an excuse that structurally weakens your confidence, that sounds borderline toxic. It sounds like hustle culture just run amok. So where is the biological line between building an unbreakable mind and just driving yourself straight into clinical burnout?
That is a critical distinction to make, and it really comes down to the difference between allostatic load and reactive avoidance.
Okay, break those down for me.
Well, allostatic load is the physiological wear and tear on the body from chronic stress. If you are sleeping 3 hours a night because you have a newborn, your biological system is genuinely compromised. You need recovery.
Right, you can't just tough your way out of sleep deprivation forever.
Exactly. But here's where the self-honesty mechanism really has to kick in down. True recovery is planned, purposeful, and proportional.
Meaning you schedule it.
Yes. If you look at your week and say, I'm operating at a massive deficit right now, so I am strictly blocking out Sunday morning for restorative rest, that is strategic recovery.
It's a proactive decision.
Right. It is a decision made by the prefrontal cortex to maintain the machine. An excuse, on the other hand, is reactive. It happens in the moment of friction.
Oh, I see.
If you wake up on a Tuesday, you look at your running shoes, you feel a spike of dread, and you suddenly invent a reason why you shouldn't run, that is your amygdala and basal ganglia hijacking the system to avoid discomfort.
So the litmus test is intention. Like, did I plan to rest because I mapped out my physiological needs, or did I just panic at the sight of the work and negotiate my way out of it?
Exactly. You have to interrogate your own motives relentlessly. And the unbreakable mind requires a level of internal auditing that, frankly, most people simply aren't willing to endure.
Because the truth usually reveals that we had another 10% left in the tank, but we just chose not to use it.
Almost always.
So if we manage to stop the bleeding, right, if we stop accepting our own rationalizations and we actually call ourselves out, we are left staring at the mountain. We have to actually do the hard thing.
Right, the work is still waiting for you.
And this brings us to the fuel we use to get up that mountain. Usually, people's immediate instinct is to go find motivation. They watch a video, read a quote. But relying on motivation is basically pouring sugar into a gas tank, isn't it?
It really is. Because motivation is entirely tethered to dopaminergic spikes.
Okay, talk about that. How does dopamine fit in?
Well, when you watch a highly stylized video about success, or you listen to a great piece of music, your brain releases a surge of dopamine. Now, dopamine is not a reward molecule, as it's often misunderstood. It's actually a molecule of anticipation and craving.
Oh, interesting. So it's about wanting the thing, not having the thing.
Exactly. It makes you feel incredibly energized about a future outcome.
Right. It's that classic, I am going to change my entire life starting tomorrow feeling.
We've all been there.
We all know the January 1st gym phenomenon. It's practically a cliche at this point. Everyone is just high on the anticipation of their new fitness identity.
But the half-life of that chemical spike is incredibly short.
It burns out fast.
Very fast. Dopamine pathways are designed to get you to initiate an action, not to sustain a grueling, monotonous process for months on end. Once the initial novelty wears off, dopamine levels drop below baseline.
That's the crash.
That is the physiological crash. If your ability to do the work is contingent on feeling motivated, on having that dopamine present, you will inevitably quit because the chemical environment in your brain has literally changed.
So motivation basically says, I'll execute when the chemistry feels right.
Yes.
But discipline says, I will execute regardless of the internal chemical weather. And discipline is fundamentally structural, isn't it? It's about bypassing the emotional centers of the brain entirely.
It is, and it all comes back to decision fatigue. The brain consumes a massive amount of glucose,
It's an energy hog.
a huge one, and the prefrontal cortex, which handles complex decision-making and willpower, is the most energy-hungry region of all. If you wake up and have to decide whether or not you were going to work out or whether or not you were going to eat a healthy breakfast,
Or whether you are going to tackle that difficult project at work.
right, if you are making those decisions every day, you are burning through your limited cognitive bandwidth before you've even started the work.
You are taxing the system just to negotiate with yourself.
Precisely. Discipline is the process of automating behavior so that it moves out of the energy-intensive prefrontal cortex and into the highly efficient basal ganglia.
So it becomes like brushing your teeth.
Exactly. When something is a discipline, it doesn't require a decision. You don't wake up and debate whether you are going to brush your teeth. You just do it.
Because it's hardwired.
Right. The people who operate at the absolute limits of human potential have engineered their lives to minimize decisions. The routine is the master. The execution is non-negotiable.
Okay, I understand the neurology of that, and it makes perfect sense for efficiency. But let me challenge the reality of living that way for a second.
Go for it.
If everything is automated, right? If success is just this relentless, unfeeling execution of predetermined habits, wake up, grind, train, sleep, repeat, where's the joy in that?
That's a common question.
Because it sounds incredibly bleak to me. It sounds like you're just turning yourself into a biological algorithm. So where does the joy actually live in a deeply disciplined life? Are we just meant to be robots?
It requires a shift in how we actually define joy. What you are describing as bleak is just the absence of hedonia.
Hedonia, like hedonism.
Yes, the fleeting surface-level pleasure of comfort and novelty. But discipline unlocks eudaimonia, which is a deeper, much more profound sense of fulfillment that comes from mastery, competence, and living in alignment with your highest potential.
Ah, it's the joy of being someone you can actually trust.
Yes, there is a very specific type of psychological peace that only comes from knowing you are reliable.
That is huge.
When you are driven by motivation, your identity is fragile. You are always at the mercy of your next mood swing. But when you are driven by discipline, you forge an identity of immense solidity.
Because you know you'll show up.
Right. The work itself might be mundane. It usually is. But the compounding self-respect that it generates is a far more powerful and sustainable emotional state than any temporary motivational high.
Compounding self-respect. I love that phrase. And that concept is the perfect bridge into how we actually build this architecture. Because, no one wakes up one day and just effortlessly transitions from being chronically unmotivated to being this absolute master of discipline.
No, it doesn't work like that at all.
It starts microscopic. It starts with what we call the currency of confidence.
And confidence is deeply misunderstood in our culture today.
Oh, completely. It's often peddled as the state of mind you can just conjure up through positive thinking, right?
Well, yeah.
Or like standing in a mirror and saying affirmations.
But from a psychological standpoint, specifically looking at Albert Bandura's theory of self-efficacy confidence, is entirely empirical. The
Yeah.
brain is a Bayesian prediction engine.
Okay, a Bayesian prediction engine, meaning it calculates future probabilities based on past data, right?
Exactly. Your brain is constantly running models on what you are capable of based entirely on the hard evidence of your past behavior.
So it's keeping receipts.
It keeps all the receipts. If you stand in front of a mirror and tell yourself, I am a disciplined, unstoppable achiever, but your historical data shows that you hit snooze 4 times a morning and quit every project you start, your brain instantly flags the affirmation as a lie.
It calls your bluff.
It totally rejects it. You cannot trick the prediction engine.
So positive thinking without action is literally like writing a bad check to yourself. The bank knows the account is empty.
That is the perfect analogy. The only way to change the brain's internal model is to provide it with undeniable physical proof.
You have to act your way into a new identity
Yes, and this is why small wins are the ultimate mechanism for transformation.
because they're undeniable. Every time you say you were going to read 10 pages and you actually sit down to read 10 pages, you make a deposit into that confidence account.
You are feeding the Bayesian engine new data.
You're saying, look, We do what we say we're going to do. But it has to be small at first, right?
Yeah.
Because if you try to overhaul your entire life in one day, the friction is just too high, you fail, and then you just reinforce the old identity.
Right. The micro-promise is essential because it bypasses the amygdala's threat response.
Oh, that's clever.
If you say, I'm going to work out for 2 hours every day, the brain registers that as a massive metabolic threat, and it immediately prepares excuses.
Right, it sounds the alarms.
But if you say, I am going to do 5 push-ups before I get in the shower, the brain doesn't perceive that as a threat. The friction is negligible.
You can just knock it out.
Exactly. But the neurological reward, the deposit into the identity account, it still counts. Over time, as those deposits compound, your baseline identity actually shifts.
You stop being a person who's trying to build a habit, and you become a person who simply acts in accordance with who they are. Okay, but let's look at the failure state of this. Because we are human, the friction gets to us, and eventually, inevitably, we are going to break a promise to ourselves.
It happens to everyone.
We miss the micro-workout. We doom scroll for an hour instead of working. Does that one withdrawal bankrupt the entire confidence account? Like, how does the brain's prediction engine handle the failure without triggering a total collapse back into the old identity?
This touches on a really well-documented psychological phenomenon called the abstinence violation effect.
Okay, what is that?
It's often seen in addiction recovery, but it applies perfectly to discipline as well. It's basically the what the hell effect.
Oh, I know that one.
Right. You miss your morning run, you feel a spike of guilt, and your brain says, well, the streak is broken, the day is ruined, I might as well eat junk food and skip my afternoon work block too.
Right, I already messed up. Who cares?
Exactly. The danger isn't the single failure. The danger is the cascading psychological collapse that follows it.
Because the brain uses that one failure as proof that you are fundamentally flawed, so why bother trying?
Precisely. So the unbreakable mind interrupts that circuit immediately. It requires a radical form of cognitive compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization, like putting the failure in a box.
Exactly. You acknowledge the failure, you accept the discomfort of it, but you isolate it. You do not let a localized failure metastasize into a global identity crisis.
Wow. Okay, so you missed the 6.8 a.m. run. Fine. That is just a discrete data point.
Yes. The next decision happens at 7 a.m. You make a deposit then.
You don't wait for Monday to start over.
Never. You start over in the very next moment of choice.
You stop the bleeding instantly. I love that.
Yeah.
But to do that, you have to completely change your relationship with negative emotion. Because a failure, a slip-up, a rejection, those things carry a massive emotional payload.
They hurt.
They really hurt. And that brings us to the alchemy of this entire process, which is reframing discomfort and turning pain into data. Because the core philosophy here is that growth is biologically and psychologically impossible in a state of comfort.
It is. We have to look at the mechanism of adaptation here. Whether we are talking about muscular hypertrophy or neuroplasticity, the system only adapts when it is forced to deal with a load that exceeds its current capacity.
So the discomfort isn't a side effect of the growth?
No, the discomfort is the primary trigger for the growth.
That is such a huge shift in perspective. If you go into a gym and pick up a dumbbell, you aren't shocked or offended that the dumbbell is heavy.
Right, you expect it.
You don't feel victimized by gravity. You know, the resistance is the required mechanism to tear the muscle fibers so they can rebuild stronger.
Yes.
But when we step out of the physical gym and into the psychological gym, like our careers, our relationships, our personal goals, we are constantly offended by the weight. We view friction as a cosmic injustice.
We pathologize difficulty. When something is hard, we assume something is wrong. The cognitive reframe required here is massive. You have to transition from viewing pain as a threat to viewing it as raw information.
Raw information.
Yeah. Failure isn't a referendum on your worth. It is simply data revealing a gap in your preparation. Rejection isn't a personal attack. It is data testing your resilience.
Embarrassment teaches humility.
Yeah.
Loss teaches gratitude.
Exactly.
I mean, it all sounds beautiful in a controlled environment like this deep dive. But let's get into the dirt for a minute.
Let's do it.
Let's say you just stepped off a stage after completely bombing a presentation in front of your entire company. Or, I don't know, you just got a highly clinical, impersonal email rejecting you from a job you spent 6 months preparing for.
Brutal situations.
Right. In that visceral bleeding moment, your amygdala is screaming, your heart rate is elevated, you literally feel sick to your stomach. How do you practically perform that cognitive pivot? You can't just intellectualize that level of raw shame on a dime.
No, you can't, and expecting yourself to do so is just unrealistic. You have to understand the physiology of emotion first.
Okay.
Neuroanatomist Jill Bolt Taylor talks about this concept called the 90-second rule.
The 90-second rule.
Yes. When a neurological trigger happens, like reading that rejection email, the chemical flush of emotion that dumps into your bloodstream takes roughly 90 seconds to process and flush completely out of your system.
Wait, really? Just a minute and a half.
Just a minute and a half.
Right.
But during that window, you are chemically compromised. Your prefrontal cortex is actively being suppressed by the amygdala.
So for a minute and a half, you are just a passenger to the pain. You can't logic your way out of it.
Yes. You just have to write it out. The mistake people make is that they latch onto that initial chemical flush and they start looping the narrative.
Oh, like, I'm a failure, I'll never get a job, I look like an absolute idiot.
Exactly. And by repeating the thought, you trigger a fresh dump of chemicals and you stay in that emotional state for days or even weeks.
You keep refreshing the 90 seconds.
Yes, you keep restarting the clock. The practical step to cognitive detachment is to simply allow the initial physiological wave to pass without attaching a permanent narrative to it.
You just let it burn.
You observe the physical sensation, and once the autonomic nervous system starts to downregulate, once your heart rate starts to drop, you engage the prefrontal cortex by forcing an analytical task.
How do you do that?
You write it down. If you bombed the presentation, you open a blank document, and you force yourself to list the actual mechanics of the failure.
Oh, I see. Like, was the pacing off? Did I fail to anticipate the technical questions?
Exactly. By forcing the brain to organize the event analytically, you shift blood flow away from the emotional centers and back into the executive function. You literally turn the trauma into a clinical case study.
That is brilliant. You strip the emotion out by focusing obsessively on the mechanics.
Yeah.
You extract the lesson so the pain wasn't a waste of time.
Exactly.
But, as you get better at this, as you start stringing together these disciplined days, keeping your promises, turning your failures into data, you suddenly find yourself on an internal battlefield. Because the forces that want you to remain average, they don't just disappear, do they?
In fact, the friction often intensifies the further you deviate from the norm. And one of the most insidious forms of that friction is external benchmarking.
Comparison.
Comparison.
The ultimate thief of progress. I mean, if you tie your definition of success to being ahead of the people around you, you're playing a mathematically impossible game.
Yeah.
There was always someone richer or faster or younger or seemingly more put together.
Always.
Yeah.
Psychologists refer to this as relative deprivation.
Relative deprivation.
Yes. Our brains aren't wired to evaluate our absolute well-being. They are wired to evaluate our well-being relative to our immediate peer group.
Oh, so it's an evolutionary mechanism for assessing our rank in the tribe.
Exactly. But the problem is, in the digital age, your tribe is 8 billion people.
Right.
And you are being relentlessly exposed to the highly curated, heavily filtered top 1% of everyone else's highlight reels.
Right. You aren't just comparing yourself to your neighbor who's kind of in the same boat as you. You are comparing your messy, behind-the-scenes reality to the heavily edited climax of a stranger's life.
It is toxic fuel for your brain.
It really is. But how do we actually disengage from that? Because in a world where we have to be online, we have to use networks for our careers, is it actually possible to stop the comparison engine?
It's extremely difficult to turn off the subconscious comparison response entirely, but you can override it with a hyperfixation on internal metrics.
Okay, what does that look like?
The antidote to relative deprivation is absolute micro-tracking. You have to become so obsessed with your own data, your own incremental improvements, that external data loses its relevance.
So it's the difference between looking at the scoreboard and looking at your own form.
Exactly. If you are a runner and you are obsessed with whether you are faster than the guy running next to you, you will always eventually find someone who crushes you, and your motivation will just collapse.
Right.
But if you are tracking your own cadence, your own heart rate variability, your own split times compared to yesterday, you are engaging in a finite, winnable game.
You narrow your field of vision to the only variable you actually control, which is the delta between who you were yesterday and who you are today.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the execution phase on this internal battlefield. The habit of finishing. We all know people, and honestly, we've all been this person at some point, who are serial starters.
Oh, definitely.
They launch the podcast, they buy the domain name, they sign up for the marathon. Starting is intoxicating, but the messy middle is where projects go to die.
Because starting relies on that dopaminergic anticipation we discussed earlier. It's the fantasy of the outcome.
Right, the sugar rush.
But finishing requires sustained executive function in the complete absence of dopamine.
I look at uncompleted tasks, like background applications running on a computer.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, every time you start a project and abandon it when it gets hard, you don't actually close the application. It just gets minimized. It sits there in the background, quietly eating up your psychological RAM.
That is a highly accurate representation of the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect.
Yes, Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik demonstrated that the human mind remembers unfinished or interrupted tasks far more readily than completed ones.
Oh, wow. So they literally haunt you.
They do. Unfinished business creates a constant state of cognitive tension. When you have a graveyard of half-finished projects, abandoned goals, and broken promises, you are operating with a massive cognitive load. Your brain is constantly allocating background energy to the tension of those open loops.
So finishing isn't just about, getting the trophy or launching the product. Finishing is a biological necessity for clearing the system.
Yes, it's a rep in the mental gym.
Every time you push through the friction of the messy middle and actually complete something, you close the loop, free up the RAM, and myelinate the pathway of perseverance.
And that is exactly how you master the inner dialogue. We all have conflicting drives. One drive wants comfort and rationalizes retreat. The other drive wants capability and demands execution.
But you don't control which drive wins by arguing with yourself. You don't outthink the excuse.
No, you outact it.
Every completed task is a physical vocast for the identity of discipline. The voice that eventually dominates your mind isn't the one you listen to. It's the one you align your physical actions with.
Feed the excuse with inaction, it grows. Feed the discipline with completion, it becomes your baseline reality.
Man. When you synthesize all of these mechanisms, when you understand that motivation is a fleeting neurochemical spike, when you automate your choices to bypass decision fatigue, when you use the Zeigarnik effect to drive completion rather than anxiety, and when you reframe pain as an analytical data point, you completely redefine the trajectory of your life.
You really do.
But the irony, the grand cosmic joke of it all, is that when you finally arrive at this place of total discipline and unbreakable mindset, the reality of the life you've built is actually pretty mundane.
It is incredibly mundane. The architecture of greatness is built on the most boring foundation imaginable.
Right. The movie montages lied to us. They compressed 10 years of grinding anonymity into 3 minutes of heavy guitar riffs and quick cuts. But the actual lived experience of success is just waking up, looking at the spreadsheet, executing the routine, going to the gym, eating the chicken and broccoli, and going to sleep.
We see the gold medal. We don't see the thousands of lonely mornings staring at a black line at the bottom of a freezing swimming pool. And more importantly, we fail to realize that the finish line is an illusion.
The hedonic treadmill.
Yes. Even in the pursuit of greatness, the hedonic treadmill applies. Once you achieve a certain level of mastery, your brain normalizes it. What was once the pinnacle of your ambition simply becomes your new baseline.
So it never really gets easier.
No. The friction doesn't go away. It just takes a new form at a higher altitude.
Which means if you are only doing this for the external reward, you will eventually burn out.
Yeah.
You have to fall in love with the sheer, unadulterated boredom of the process. The growth itself has to become the dopamine trigger.
The continuous expansion of your capabilities is the only sustainable reward, because love will continue to supply resistance regardless of how strong you get.
There is a visualization from our source material that pulls all of this together, and honestly, it is absolutely haunting.
It's very powerful.
I want you to imagine that at the very end of your life, when the clock runs out, you are introduced to someone. You meet the person you actually became, with all your habits and choices realized, and standing right next to them is the person you could have become, the ultimate, uncompromised version of your potential.
The gap between those two figures is the physical manifestation of your daily choices.
Yes. It isn't determined by a lack of genetic luck or a lack of opportunity. The delta is measured exactly by the number of times you encountered friction and chose the path of least resistance.
It is measured by every snooze button, every skipped rep, every hard conversation avoided, and every excuse you validated.
Your future is not waiting for a burst of inspiration. It isn't waiting for you to feel ready. It is waiting for the cold, boring, unbreakable architecture of discipline.
But the knowledge of these mechanisms is absolutely useless without application. As we close this out, the imperative is to take this out of the realm of theory. Do not let this analysis just be another dopamine hit of motivation that you burn through by tomorrow morning.
Exactly. Find one point of friction today. Just something small, something you've been avoiding, do it. Close the loop, then wake up tomorrow and find another one. Extraordinary lives are not built through a few heroic cinematic days. They are built through thousands of completely ordinary days, executed with ruthless consistency.
Master the micro decisions, and the macro trajectory takes care of itself.
But I want to leave you with one final overarching thought to chew on before we go. We've spent this entire time dissecting the internal mechanics of your own mind, your own potential, your own limits. It's a very inward-facing pursuit. But think about the physics of what happens when you actually embody this. If you commit to the boring, unglamorous work of building an unbreakable mind, if you become the person who never negotiates with an excuse, how does that new gravity affect the people in your orbit?
You become a disruption to their own cognitive dissonance.
Yes. Think about the people in your life who are currently trapped by their own rationalizations, the people you love who are actively settling for less. You can't lecture them into changing, you can't motivate them out of it. But is it possible that by you quietly and relentlessly embracing the difficult work of discipline, your physical example eventually shatters their excuses?
When you stop accepting the lie of your own limits, you make it incredibly difficult for anyone around you to keep believing theirs.
By refusing to settle for your own perceived limits, you might inadvertently become the exact empirical evidence someone else needs to finally begin their own journey. So go find some friction today. Strip the emotion out of it. Turn the pain into data. And let's see what happens when you stop negotiating with the voice that tells you to quit.